It was supposed to be the game of the decade, the one that would change everything. For years, we were fed a vision of a breathtaking, futuristic world. We saw Keanu Reeves on stage, we saw stunning trailers, and we believed the hype. We bought the game, we pre-ordered the merchandise, and then on launch day, it all came crashing down. What was promised was a masterpiece. What we got was a buggy, broken mess. This wasn't just a simple mistake. It was a spectacular failure of business, a psychological case study in overpromising, and a human story of burnout and broken trust. Today, GENSHIFT is performing a post-mortem on the launch of Cyberpunk 2077. We're going to peel back the layers of hype to reveal the deep-seated issues that led to one of gaming's biggest disasters. Get ready to explore the dark side of ambition. Hit that subscribe button now to join us in understanding the psyche of a generation. 1. The promise. Building the hype machine. The marketing blitz. The story of Cyberpunk 2077's fall from grace begins with the story of its ascent, a masterclass in building a global cultural event out of pure potential. The journey started way back in 2012 with a single, evocative teaser trailer that promised a dark, mature, and impossibly cool future. Then, for years, there was mostly silence. This calculated quiet, punctuated by sporadic updates, allowed a mythos to grow. The game wasn't just a product in development, it was a legend in the making, gestating in the shadows, promising to be everything to everyone. The real marketing blitz didn't begin until 2018, and it was engineered to perfection. At E3 that year, developers CD Projekt Red, or CDPR, unveiled a 50-minute gameplay demo that left audiences breathless. But behind the scenes, this demo was a dangerous gamble. According to developers who worked on the project, the E3 2018 demo was almost entirely fake. It was a meticulously crafted vertical slice that represented a target, not a reality. It consumed months of development time that should have been spent building the game's core systems, creating a massive internal disconnect between the fantasy being sold to the public and the struggling reality of development. This marketing strategy wasn't just about showing off a product, it was about conditioning an audience. Neuroscientific studies show that the anticipation of a reward can trigger a more powerful dopamine release than the reward itself. CDPR's long, drawn-out reveal cycle was a dopamine engine. Each Night City Wire episode, each cinematic trailer, was a carefully timed hit of excitement, reinforcing our positive association and building an intense personal investment in the game's success. Then, at E3 2019, the hype machine went supernova. Keanu Reeves walked onto the stage, revealing his role as the iconic Johnny Silverhand. When a fan shouted, "You're breathtaking!" his genuine, heartfelt response, "You're breathtaking! You're all breathtaking!" became a global meme. In that moment, Cyberpunk 2077 transcended gaming. It was now a cultural touchstone, an event you simply had to be a part of. This was the peak of CDPR's gamer-centric value proposition. Riding the immense goodwill from their universally acclaimed game, The Witcher 3, they had built a powerful contract with their audience. The implicit promise was clear. We are CD Projekt Red. Our games are worth the wait. And for 8 long years, we believed them. The marketing wasn't just a campaign running parallel to the game's troubled development. It was a direct cause of its eventual failure. 2. The reality. A broken world on launch day. The fall. On December 10, 2020, that 8-year contract of trust was spectacularly broken. The collision between the promised world of Night City and the delivered reality was a catastrophe, especially for the millions who had bought the game for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. This wasn't a case of a few minor bugs. This was a fundamentally unfinished, often unplayable product. On last-gen consoles, the vibrant, neon-drenched metropolis shown in demos was replaced by a world that was drab and dreary. Colors were washed out, textures were flat, and NPCs were rendered so poorly they often appeared as indiscernible shapes or polygonal blobs. The game was plagued by catastrophic performance issues. Frame rates would plummet in populated areas, driving at high speeds would cause the game to freeze entirely, and game-breaking bugs, like weapons failing to appear or the scanner becoming unusable, forced players to constantly reload saves or restart their consoles just to progress. The technical state was so dire that it devolved into a global meme with compilations of absurd glitches going viral. Characters T-posing on motorcycles, cars spawning from thin air and exploding, NPCs walking through walls, and physics-defying crashes that were more comedy than Cyberpunk. What elevated this from a botched launch to a genuine scandal was the deliberate deception. CDPR had actively concealed the state of the console versions. They provided review codes only for the high-end PC version, and reportedly restricted media from using their gameplay footage, ensuring the first impressions were based on the best-case scenario. In investor calls, management insisted the game ran surprisingly well on older consoles, a statement that was a blatant falsehood. The player outrage was swift and deafening. It culminated in an unprecedented move from a platform holder. After being inundated with refund requests, Sony took the extraordinary step of completely removing Cyberpunk 2077 from the PlayStation Store, a public rebuke of a magnitude never before seen for a AAA title. This wasn't just about protecting consumers. It was a response to a corporate betrayal. Reports suggest CDPR, without consulting its partners, publicly directed angry customers to Sony and Microsoft for refunds, effectively passing the buck for their own failure. Sony's decision was a powerful message to the entire industry. Platform holders would not be forced to carry the reputational and logistical cost of a publisher's lies. For the community, the fallout was complex. The feeling of betrayal was immense, but for some, the initial reaction wasn't anger, but a fierce defense of the game. This is a classic example of cognitive dissonance, the psychological discomfort felt when holding two conflicting beliefs. I am a smart consumer who waited years for a masterpiece, versus, this game I championed is a broken mess. To resolve that discomfort, it's often easier to reject the new reality. The game isn't that bad, the haters are exaggerating, than to admit you were fooled. For years, being hyped for Cyberpunk 2077 had become a part of many gamers' identities. To accept its failure was to accept a failure in their judgment, a painful process that led to the initial tribalism and infighting that defined the game's launch. 3. The pressure cooker, crunch culture and project management failure. To understand how a studio once lauded as the industry's most trusted developer could fall so far, we have to look inside the pressure cooker. The disaster of December 2020 wasn't a sudden accident. It was the inevitable result of years of systemic project management failures and a deeply unethical work culture. The timeline is damning. Though announced in 2012, full development on Cyberpunk 2077 didn't truly begin until 2016. This was because the project underwent a massive reset, with a new game director taking over and fundamental elements being overhauled, including a shift from a third-person to a first-person perspective. This single decision effectively cut the realistic development time in half, while the project's ambition only grew, setting the stage for an impossible task. This foundational mistake was compounded by a series of poor decisions. As we've seen, months of precious development time were funneled into creating a fake E3 demo designed to impress investors and the public, rather than building the actual game. As deadlines loomed and the gap between the marketed vision and the technical reality widened, management made a fateful choice. After publicly promising a non-obligatory crunch policy to widespread praise, studio head Adam Badowski sent an internal email announcing mandatory 6-day work weeks for the entire development team to get the game out the door. This was a profound betrayal of trust, both to the public and to their employees. Crunch is a sanitized industry term for a toxic practice, forcing employees to work excessive, grueling hours under immense pressure. It leads to burnout, severe mental and physical health issues, and, as reported by former CDPR staff, the destruction of personal relationships and families. Crunch is never a sign of passion or dedication. It is always a symptom of catastrophic project management failure. It was a desperate, brutal attempt to make up for years of unrealistic planning. The hubris of management was a key factor. Internal engineers reportedly warned that the game was far too complex to run on 7-year-old last-gen consoles, but these concerns were dismissed. The leadership, blinded by the success of The Witcher 3, operated under the dangerous assumption that they could simply pull off another miracle. This arrogance, combined with relentless pressure from investors to hit a holiday release window, sealed the game's fate. The most profound failure, however, is the deep, dystopian irony at the heart of this story. Cyberpunk 2077 is a game whose narrative critiques the dehumanizing nature of soulless megacorporations and the exploitation of individuals for profit. Yet, it was created through the very same exploitative labor practices it thematically condemns. This contradiction is a moral failure that undermines the game's artistic message, a hypocrisy that resonates deeply with a generation that values authenticity and ethical consistency above all else. The world of Night City was built on the burnout of its creators. 4. The lesson, a cautionary tale for an entire industry. The story of Cyberpunk 2077 does not end in December 2020. What followed was one of the most expensive and arduous redemption arcs in gaming history. CD Projekt Red invested years of work and an estimated $125 million into fixing the base game and developing the critically acclaimed Phantom Liberty expansion. This effort, combined with the massive success of the Netflix anime Cyberpunk, Edgerunners, which drove 1 million players a day back to the game, slowly began to repair the damage. Today, the game holds a very positive rating on Steam and is by most accounts the experience it was always meant to be. But to frame this as a simple comeback story is to miss the point. The true lasting legacy of the Cyberpunk 2077 saga is not the redemption of one game, but the education of an entire audience. Before this debacle, the concept of crunch culture was an insider term, largely confined to industry journalism. The spectacular mainstream failure of Cyberpunk 2077 forged a direct, tangible link between unethical labor practices and a negative player experience. Consumers, particularly the ethically conscious Gen Z demographic, have learned to see a clear causal chain. Unchecked corporate ambition and investor pressure lead to crunch, and crunch leads to broken, unfinished products. The term crunch entered the mainstream gamer lexicon not as a sign of dedication, but as a bright red flag for poor quality. This permanently elevated the ethical literacy of the consumer base, making them a more powerful and vocal check on corporate behavior. The saga forced a re-evaluation of what value means in gaming. It's no longer just about graphics, features, or the number of hours of content. A new crucial variable was added to the equation: ethical production. For a growing number of players, a game's value is diminished if it was built on the suffering of its developers. This raises a critical question: does this successful redemption arc create a dangerous precedent? Does it teach publishers that they can release a fundamentally broken product, absorb the initial backlash, fix it over several years, and still emerge profitable? It's a question the industry is still grappling with. But the ultimate lesson from Night City is one of trust. In our hyper-connected world, a company's reputation for authenticity and transparency is its most valuable asset. Once shattered, it is incredibly expensive, difficult, and painful to rebuild. Conclusion. The story of Cyberpunk 2077 is so much more than just a failed video game. It's a powerful, cautionary tale about the currency of trust, the ethics of creation, and the very real human cost of unchecked hype. It reminds us that behind every digital world are hundreds of human beings, and their well-being matters. The biggest takeaway is that power has shifted. A conscious, critical, and vocal consumer base is the ultimate check on corporate overreach in gaming and every other industry. It's our expectations and our standards that will shape a better, more ethical future. And what did you learn from the Cyberpunk saga? Share your experience in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation going. And if you believe in high-effort stories that respect your intelligence, make sure you're subscribed to GENSHIFT. Thanks for watching.